Happy Thursday night. Welcome to another edition of Behind the Point Spread. Yes. I know we're normally on Wednesdays, but damn it, we have lives too. And that means, well, sometimes we got to switch the date up on you because that's what we do. We sometimes we just got to switch the date up on you. And just to let everybody know, for the next 2 weeks, tonight and next week, we will be running on a Thursday. If you want to have a conversation with me, with Dr. Rob Zatechka or Scott Spreitzer, you can always call and ask your question at 402-543-5556. Again, that's 402-543-5556. Listen, my son is the call screener, and I want to see if this works. He's not even in my house tonight. He's like at his girlfriend's house, and he's like a mile and a half away. Let's see if this call screening thing works, all right, from a mobile distance. So 402-543-5556. Make sure to follow Doc Talk Sports on all the social media channels. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Like us on Facebook. Follow Dr. Rob on Twitter at Doc Talk Sports. And me, Travis Justice, on Twitter at Travis Creates. Welcome back, everybody, to another Behind the Point Spread. He's Dr. Rob Zatechka. He's our Vegas insider, Scott Spreitzer. And Scott, you had to skip last night because you went to a show down there on the Strip, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. It's kind of like, that's one of those things you got to do with the wife. And saw Sarah Brightman at the Venetian, great showroom, one of the best. B-52s coming there next week on their farewell tour.
Hold on, the B-52s are still around?
They got one more, I guess. They're saying this is the final show, so I'll be there again probably next week. But great place to see a show. But here's the thing. If I would have said, listen, I can't go see Sarah Brightman, I've got a podcast to do, I would need to sleep on your couch for about 2 weeks. And it's kind of a long commute. So
hey, this isn't a podcast. It's a live YouTube show, okay? There's a huge difference.
That too. But, it was a good time. It was a good time with a great dinner. We ate dinner till about 2 a.m. with our favorite waiters and waitresses at a little Japanese joint in Chinatown. So, got my Japanese on, got my pop opera on, and I'm ready to go.
Hey, Dr. Rob.
Talk to me.
Breaking news. Hold on, let me do that again. Breaking news. Mickey Joseph announced that the black shirts are no more this year. They're not going to hand out any black shirts. No more this year. So
I don't know if that's breaking. I thought that was like last week.
No, it became official today.
It's like permanent no more.
Yeah, it's permanent no more. Okay, no more black shirts this year.
Do you care?
No, I don't care.
That's because you're a Cyclone fan.
No, I'm a Hawkeye fan. Stop doing that to me. But in all seriousness, is that a tradition that has kind of gone by the wayside? I mean, let's have an honest conversation about this.
Well, when they're that bad, yes, it's gone by the wayside.
All right, that's fair. You know what's going to happen to that, Rob? You're going to have more and more people calling you a bum, all right? And that's why we want people to join the Bum Brigade, all right? Scott, I don't know if you've seen these or not, but we have a brand new T-shirt out, and somebody called Dr. Rob a bum on Twitter the other day. They're like, you know what? You're a bum. Go slander some other program. So we had a T-shirt made that just says bum.
First of all, I'm sitting there looking at a guy who looks like he could still play, start on the defense for the Huskers and be better than most of them, and you're going to call the guy a bum?
I'm an offensive lineman. That's what's crazy.
Well, that's what's crazy. Yeah. Did I say defensive lineman? That's great.
I'm an offensive lineman, and I'm still probably.
That's great. I'm sitting here drinking water. I should switch to the strong stuff. I'm telling you.
All right, Scott. Defense. Which one of these T-shirts do you want? I'll buy you a T-shirt.
It's kind of small on my screen, and I do see the bomb in clear letters.
So we've got So I'll bring him up. We've got the Sorry Dave T-shirt, which is an apology to Dave Remington, because every time we drop an F-bomb, an S-bomb, or a swear word on the podcast, we have to say sorry, Dave, because back when he was the sponsor of the podcast, he asked us not to swear, and we couldn't do that for him. Another one is called Life Grab a Helmet. That came from Mark Farley, the head coach of the Northern Iowa Panthers. Because we drink a lot of beer on our show, we have the Diversified Portfolio shirt, which is a number of different beers that you can drink in a number of different glasses. And then, of course, an old staple in the bunch is win or lose, we drink booze. And then, of course, we have the bum T-shirt as well. So if you want one of those,
I like the win or lose. I mean, that's that's life. And by the way, I was it's kind of funny because I was kind of testing Rob there to see if he was paying attention. which side of the ball he used to play on. So just wanted to
Well,
make sure
there were a lot of blows to the head. I'm not going to.
Can't believe I said defensive. I was a fan of yours, and I'm saying defense. And by the way, he could play offensive line right now for this squad.
Which is well, that actually might. I mean, the interesting thing is we talk about how bad the offensive line is. We talk about the black shirts. I mean, the offensive line is probably the weakest point on the team right now. I mean, that's the thing that, at least for me as a former offensive line, it makes it tough to watch these games. And Travis and I, we do the doc's diagnosis where we do a quick play breakdown, just kind of like, hey, here's what happened, why this play worked or why it didn't work. And we're at the point now where every week there's hey, here's where the offensive tackles screwed up again.
Yep.
Or here's where the offensive tackles just absolutely got beat on a given play, and Casey Thompson took a huge hit. So,
hey, Rob, we're getting T-shirt selections in. Brian says, how about this one? I woke up after Rob put me under and my butt hurts.
No, that's all due to the surgeon. Anesthesia had nothing to do to the butt hurt.
He does say, just kidding. I'd never have you put me under, Monty only. And he's talking about Monty Chris.
Well, so one of my work partners, another anesthesiologist here in town, is Monty Cristo. So the former Nebraska
quarterback, right?
Yeah. Oh, man. So, Scott, we did get this early on before the show even started. Longhorns says lots of good games this weekend. And before we dive in, there are a lot of good games this weekend in college football.
A little bit different than the last couple of weeks. We survived last week at the winning college football weekend, thanks in part to Tennessee, which was our top play when they just hammered LSU. They did a nice job, though, the Tigers, by the way, of turning it over on that opening kickoff and never had to look back. So I do appreciate that. But yeah, I mean, there are a ton of good games. There are a lot of questions that get to be answered this week, on some of these teams. So I'm really looking forward to this. I mean, I've got, 5 or 6 bets right now. It could be 10 or 12 by the weekend, but the bottom line is I'm more into this week than I was last week, and hopefully we'll continue to win again in college.
Well, let's dive right into this week's game, shall we? And the first one, this is an intriguing game. NC State at Syracuse. The Orangemen a 3.5-point favorite. The over/under at 42 on this, Scott.
Yeah, I would tell people to search around because this is one of those, you got to know when to buy and when to search for lines, because if you like Syracuse, there are a couple. There's not a lot. Couple of threes out there. If you like NC State, there are plenty of 3.5. So you should be able to get the number better for yourself on the key number of 3. But yeah, it's one of the bigger home games for the Orange in some time. And if they're undefeated after this game, they got an even bigger game next week against Clemson. But they had last week off after the blowout win 2 weeks ago against Outman Wagner, meaning the Orange should have high energy. The injury level is low for this week's game. And then, of course, NC State, not to bury the lead, but it looks like they're probably going to be without their quarterback, Devin Leary. He's got the shoulder injury. He's listed as questionable. If he does play, the reports are he's not even close to 100%, so I'm guessing he probably doesn't go. But here's the thing. Even with Leary at quarterback up until he got injured last week, this wasn't an offensive juggernaut, the Wolfpack. They were 80th, 86th, and 91st in yards passing per game, yards rushing per game, and total yards per game. So it's not like they're replacing a Heisman Trophy candidate, even though he is a good quarterback and everybody's confident playing around him, which does matter, of course. The offense, though, I think takes another step down or two in level of effectiveness if he can't go. But they're all those back-to-back draining games, man. They just played Clemson and Florida State back-to-back. And this marks their 7th straight week of action. And, like you mentioned above, that the Orange obviously have had almost 2 weeks off, if you don't count Wagner as any kind of intense battle.
I don't count Wagner as anything.
Yeah, there you go. So, I mean, it's one of those things where they've had the time off. They've got a really good quarterback, Garrett Schrader, playing better than advertised before the season. 10 touchdowns, only 1 pick, 70% passer. What I like about him is he can move and escape and pass rushes, but yet he doesn't look to run. He's got about a little over 200 yards rushing, but again, it's because that, if his progressions, he goes through them and there's nobody open, he will escape a little bit, get a few yards instead of taking losses. The receiving core has 3 players, by the way, guys, if you watch them this week with the Qs, 3 players who average more than 4 receptions apiece as far as the wide receivers. Pretty deep at wide receiver. And then you got Sean Tucker at running back, arguably one of the best running backs in college football right now. So it's going to be interesting because NC State, I would guess that their coaches knew on Monday whether or not Leary was going to be able to play in this game or not, and haven't just divulged the information to everybody quite yet. I got to ask you, Rob, real quick on this game, if you don't mind, when you see this kind of stuff after you played major college football and you see a team having to play like back-to-back intense battles against Clemson and Florida State where they split, talking about NC State, on top of that, they've had no time off, 7 straight weeks of hard-nosed college football. I mean, does that matter to you guys on the field? Do you feel the energy level kind of like escape if you fall behind early when you played so many games, including, just really intense battles in the previous 2 games?
I think most teams, it's almost kind of the opposite. Most teams love this stuff.
Okay.
And I'm kind of going back to my Big 8 days, which everybody thinks of as it was sort of the notion that it was kind of like you had Nebraska and Oklahoma or Nebraska and Colorado at the top of the conference. And after that, it was a bunch of nobodies. I was down in Lincoln at a time where Oklahoma was a top 25 team every year. Colorado was a top 5 team every year. Oklahoma State was a very good team every year. That was kind of you still had some great teams. With
Iowa State had Marv Seiler as a quarterback.
What's that?
Iowa State had Marv Seiler as a quarterback.
Yeah, you had Iowa State that was just an absolute disaster and still managed to beat us. Kansas, I remember my sophomore and junior seasons, Kansas was a ranked team. My sophomore year, we played Kansas and Lincoln. I think they were 7th in one of the polls. I mean, they had like Dana Stubblefield, Gilbert Brown, June Henley at running back, Kwame Lassiter, longtime Arizona Cardinal at safety. So they had a bunch of NFL guys that were really good down in KU at the time that Glenn Mason had brought in. And so, that was kind of a little bit of a time period where you would play some very good teams every week, every other week. I mean, we had Washington on the schedule a couple of years. We had Arizona State on the schedule a couple of years. We played Texas Tech 2 or 3 times when I was down there. That was Spike Dykes era where they had guys like Bam Morris and Zach Thomas and Zebby Lethridge. And I mean, basically some very good athletes. And so UCLA, when they had J.J. Stokes, I mean, that was it's not like that was an era where it was 1 or 2 good teams and then it was a pushover the rest of the way. Every year you were playing a very good schedule of 5 or 6, maybe 7 ranked teams. And so each week you had to really be on your ball. Every week you had to be on the ball in terms of who you were playing against because there were some very good teams on a consistent basis. Most good teams like that. And where you get into trouble as a good team is going against the lesser teams.
Iowa State, right? I mean,
exactly.
What was the win you came off against Iowa State when Marv Seiler ran by all you guys?
So we had played a top 5 Colorado team in Lincoln, beat them 52-7. The next week, I think it was an ESPN Thursday night game. We played Kansas, and that was at the time. I think they were top 10. I think they were 7th in the nation. We beat Kansas 49-7 the next week. And then it was the week after we go to Iowa State. And that's when we laid an egg and lost to Marv Seiler and Kansas State. It was those bad
He's still running, by the way.
Led down. You give a team, you give a good team a slate of easy games. That's where you're going to stub your toe. Give a fairly good team a bunch of great opponents, a tough schedule. That's where you're going to see guys shine. It's easy to get up for a top 5 Colorado team. It's easy to get up for a top 5 KU team when they're ranked 7th in the nation and they got a bunch of NFL guys. If you got to go play Colorado and then you got to go play Oklahoma, if you got to play, my senior year, we played at the time, top 10. They finished as a very good bowl team, but we played a top 10 West Virginia team, and then we had UCLA, and then we had Texas Tech. I mean, it was one good team after the other. That's what's easy. from a motivational standpoint.
So there's some so take that into account, Scott, when you think that. So it's those teams coming off the lesser teams. They'll get up for the big ones, but they won't get up for the small ones.
It's always easy to get up for those big games. When you play big game after big game after big game after big game, most good athletic teams, it doesn't matter whether it's basketball or soccer or football, it's easy to get up and stay up and play at that high level. It's when you've got to go out and play against the lesser teams, that's where you get in trouble.
Well, we're also talking about, I was just going to say that you were on an elite level major college football team, back then. And I think that has depth, the depth that you guys get with that probably helps out too. Listen, NC State's not bad. They're a top 25 football team, but I question their depth. It's not elite level. It's good. It's just not elite.
It is, but they're looking at this where they're looking at Syracuse and going, okay, here's an undefeated team. Mm-hmm. It kind of has I find these stories.
Think about that for a second. Syracuse is unbeaten. If you were to ask anybody around, name the unbeaten college football teams in the country right now, Syracuse to the average would not be one that popped up.
Yeah, nobody's going to think of them off the top. But I find the interconnectedness of this interesting because Nebraska's got Purdue, which is one of the teams that lost to Syracuse. And it was a really close loss, but I actually think that says a lot about Purdue and how good Purdue is.
Well, you mentioned the big game, Scott, and I think this is another one. Alabama played Texas A&M last week. That was a good game. Tennessee was at LSU. Here you got these two matching up, coming off big games. Alabama at Tennessee. Bama, a 7-point favorite, 65.5 on the over-under on this. This is just intriguing. This is good old-fashioned SEC football with Tennessee seeming to be back to where it belongs in the national. On the national stage.
And I'm just going to be candid with you. I thought we got to talk about this game. Is this a great game to bet? Absolutely not. Because I'm just being honest and candid with you. This is just a fun game to talk about because, I had Tennessee was my top play last week against LSU, and it was an easy win. They win 40-13. So there was no look ahead factor. And the handicap, and if you go back on that particular topic and you talk about look ahead factors, I get it with sandwich situations where maybe you played the number 5 team last week. Next week, you got the number 1 team. And in the middle of that, you're playing, Podunk State. It's tough to get up for that in the sandwich. But these teams that have big games up next, at least over the last decade, they really play well the week before that. And not to knock LSU down as not being a big, big opponent. But again, when Alabama's up next, it would be easy to look ahead with them. Yeah. So anyway, having said that, the offense can struggle when you talk about this Alabama team. We've seen them do a couple of things, and this is all relative speaking because it's Nick Saban after all. So they do struggle a little bit more than we're used to seeing. They can struggle. They can shoot themselves in the foot, whether it be penalties against Texas or turnovers against A&M, albeit it wasn't Bryce Young out there. They certainly did not dominate A&M last week. And then Tennessee, you'll rarely, we talked about this, I think, on last week's show, you'll rarely hear the non-betting media, when they talk about the Volunteers, giving their defense any credit. It's starting to come around a little bit. And I think this is a better defense, more talented defense than they are given credit for. You got their quarterback, Hendon Hooker. I tell you what, they upset Alabama. The guy's, this close to getting an invite to the Downtown Athletic Club. Come December, that's how well he's playing. He's played extremely well. And last year, as I'm thinking about this, last year, Hendon Hooker started the game with 2 touchdown passes. Tennessee's leading 14-7 after the first quarter. He had a bad interception in the mix, but that final score was 52-24. It was a 7-point game with 12 minutes to go, which is something you got to deal with when you're playing against Alabama. I say in baseball, like the Houston Astros, I hate playing against Houston. They can hang a crooked number in any inning. That's Alabama, man. They could put up, 3 touchdowns in any quarter of any game, even in a close game. But I think Teddy can hang around in this one, man. I really do. Even if Bryce Young goes, which I think he will, he's listed as questionable, but I think he's going to go in this one. They're at 15-0 under Saban the last 15 meetings, Alabama in the series. They've covered 11 of those games. But I think this is the best chance the Vols have. Their offense is next level. And the cool thing about this, like I said, it's not a great game to bet. This is a game where you have your notepad, if you're a bettor, and you're watching it and you're writing down stuff that's going to help you the rest of the season. So, and there's also a good mid-season thing when a team's like 5-0, 6-0, and they lose that first game. Those teams a lot of times can let that first loss beat them the next week also. So it's just kind of something to take notes of. And I think Tennessee will hang around in this one. I think it's going to be a little bit better than last year.
All right, raise your hand, both of you, if you agree with me that you're surprised that Josh Heupel has been able to do what he's been able to do at Tennessee.
I am. I'm a little surprised this fast.
I mean, are you talking in terms of the sense that Joshy himself?
I mean, he was fired as the OC at Oklahoma. Lincoln Riley had to cut him loose, or was it Bob Stoops at the end of that? I mean, he was fired.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm looking at sort of the big picture here. I mean, one of the things about Tennessee that has been kind of interesting to me is look at their defense. They've played really good defense all year. And their co-defensive coordinator, former Penn State guy, or D coordinator at Tennessee. He was the co-defensive coordinator at Penn State. I got to go back and look at the dates, but I mean, it was like 06 to 2017 or 08 to 2019. But that's I'm looking at James's surprise as well. But I mean, I kind of am. I mean, looking at Heupel, but it's one of those things where you look at what they're doing on the field, and you look at who they have from a coaching staff standpoint. They've got some really, really good coaches on that staff.
Yeah.
And Tennessee's D coordinator, the guy's good. I'm absolutely blanking on his name, but I'm like 99% sure. I'm going to look him up here. I'm pulling it up on Google right now, but
I thought Heupel was good, but not great at Central Florida.
But he was only there a year, right? I mean, he went in. Danny White got the job at Tennessee and took him. And and I think most people, Scott, would go, well, he played with Scott Frost players. He took Scott Frost players at UCF and won with them. Was what he should have done. And when he went to Tennessee, you're like, man, that's an interesting hire by Danny White. And it just goes to show you it's a crapshoot. Anytime you hire a head coach, it's a crapshoot. Everybody thought Scott Frost was going to be a home run. Everybody kind of looked at Josh Heupel and went, I don't know. Does that work at Tennessee? And look how the whole thing has turned out. It's weird how this all turns out. Is
there any truth to the rumor? Real quick, I got to throw this out there. I hate to spread rumors.
We like rumors, by the way.
Is there any truth to the rumor that Josh Heupel's going to be fired? No, I'm kidding. Is there any truth to the rumor that Scott Frost is hanging out in Tempe as an offensive consultant?
There's been some truth to it, but I don't know how much.
Okay. I know one of the coaches is his buddies or whatever, their buddies or whatever. But
now he's got a place down there, doesn't he, Rob? I think he's got a place down there.
And you know what? I mean, in Arizona, that I don't. His wife's from that area.
Yeah, and that's why
his wife I thought was a Scottsdale person.
Yeah.
Hey, so I'm kind of bouncing back to Tennessee here. So
he changed
Tim Banks, who's Tennessee's D coordinator. So Central Michigan 07 to 09, Cincinnati 2010, 2011. This is his defensive coordinator positions, by the way. 2012 to 2015 at Illinois, and then 2016 to 2020 as Penn State's co-defensive coordinator.
And Penn State had some pretty good defenses during that.
Absolutely.
They had some great defenses in that time period. Which for all you Husker fans out there, Mike Eckler is the outside linebackers coach and special teams coordinator.
Wow. So Mike Eckler, for those of you who don't know, is from Blair. He was a one-time Nebraska assistant coach with Bill Callahan. He was actually went to Les Miles. He was with he went to Indiana to be the defensive coordinator. He went back to Kansas with Les Miles. Got out of that dumpster fire before it really blew up.
I think Eckler saw that coming.
Yeah, I think he saw that coming as well. But he's a local guy, and Rob actually rode the plane with him. I think he cheap shotted Rob in the in the game in Japan.
We scored a touchdown because of Mike Eckler.
So I think it's Kansas State, wasn't it?
Yes,
it was. The guy we ran a draw on like a 3rd and 15, which in and of itself is a mind-blowingly bad play, but I think Osborne was just looking for some hunting position. We ran a draw, and Tommy Frazier gets stopped for less than whatever he needed for the first down. Eckler red pass. He drops deep. I think he was a freshman on the team. He realizes it's a draw play, so he turns around and starts barreling back up field, not realizing – that Frazier's already been tackled. And he just slams it. Like, I'm already walking back to the huddle. Like, the play's over, refs have blown the whistle. We're already huddling back up again. And I'm almost to the offensive huddle, and the entire huddle turns around, looks at me, and goes, "Look out." And I turn around and get decleated by Mike Eckler, who's got like a 60-yard head start and doesn't even realize that the play's been over for like 20 seconds.
So you were the cameraman, and Eckler was Devontae Adams, is what I'm hearing here.
100%.
So you ran it his way.
Exactly. I stepped in front of him.
Yes. You know where I was that night? I remember that crap. I don't know why. Not that that's crap. I don't know why I remember weird stuff. I was at the Stardust Casino Race and Sportsbook hosting a Saturday night Stardust show. We used to do 10 to midnight, and we used to do it in front of a live sportsbook crowd. So you guys, for real, you guys were the main event. You guys, because that's, the last game awesome. On. Out here it was like 10, 11 o'clock at night again on a Saturday night. So you've got, a couple hundred people hanging on to that bailout blowout that they're putting their tickets on, trying to get that last winning ticket. And I do remember that game quite well. That was my old Stardust Line days back in the mid-90s and late 90s, whatever it was. Mid-90s, I guess.
92?
Yeah. Because I was in Wisconsin at that time.
Yeah.
All right. So, Scott, a lot of people on my radio show are going to have a keen eye to this one. Iowa State's been so close. And I got to be honest with you, this 16-point spread is intriguing to me. I'm tempted. And there's some value here at Iowa State on the money line too at plus 555. I kind of like the Cyclones here.
Yeah, and it's come down a little bit. Sharper action this week has taken that number down a little bit. And the reason we're doing this game, and I thought it'd be a good game to talk about, Travis, not just for value, but Rob told me that Iowa State's your favorite team. That's your big Cyclone.
Stop it. So. Both of you, stop it.
But listen, it's not like the Cyclones have been getting beat by the Dregs. The 3 losses came against teams playing a combined 765 winning football, and they lost those games by less than 4 points per game on average. I like the defense. 14 points a game is all they allow. They held Baylor in check for the most part, almost 100 yards below their season average. I like on offense the Deckers-Hutchinson combination. And the Texas defense is nothing special, guys. I know what they did to the Oklahoma Sooners, but the Sooners are an absolute mess. They're the messiest team in the, I guess the Southern Plains, if you will, as we make up stuff, since Nebraska was on the Northern Plains with Shenander defense. They're just an absolute piece of garbage right now with Oklahoma. So Texas piled up their numbers against the badly struggling Sooners, against Texas Tech, UL Monroe, UTSA, Texas San Antonio, and West Virginia. West Virginia can't tackle anybody, by the way. In fact, that cameraman would have probably escaped with a little brush if he would have gone up against West Virginia. But those last 4 teams that I just mentioned, not including Oklahoma, they all allow more than 29 points per game on the season, each one of those teams I just mentioned. So the Longhorns, really, the way I look at it, because of where Oklahoma was last week when they played them, this is the second toughest defense Texas is going to have played so far this season. It's Alabama followed by Iowa State. And I think they get the cover here, man. I think it's a close, hang the number type of game. I don't believe they're going to win in Austin outright, but I could see this coming down maybe to a 10-point game. And we do know that Campbell has a tendency to play very close games no matter who he's playing. And I do believe they're a good side here to bet. I really do. And again, it's not just because they are your favorite team. I think it's a good spot. I think there's value there.
I don't know. So not on the money line, but on the spread, right?
You could take a shot at sprinkle a little bit on the money line. What the heck? But I'm not going to do it. But, it's not a bad idea to once in a while put a couple % of your bet. Look at what Washington State did in Madison. I took the points, 17 and a half. A buddy of mine that is always down at the Circa. He's a pro bettor here in town when I do the shows down there on Saturday nights. Comes walking in with this money line ticket. He got a plus 700. That's $100 wins $700.
Yeah.
So if you're confident on this team, my suggestion would be, if you're going to get involved, take the 16 and a half. But if you're having some fun, you put $20 on this and all of a sudden you get back $110, $120 if they went outright. Now, listen, all this could go by the wayside. Iowa State makes a couple of dumb moves on offense, and it's 24-3 at the half in favor of Texas. Yeah. But I do think they hang the number. And if you're just talking from a point spread value standpoint, which is what I care about, because in the long run, if you're on the value, you're going to make more money more than you're going to lose money, and that would be the Cyclones.
All right, before we get to our final game, Brian does want to know, how is Oklahoma favored by 9 against Kansas?
Boy, all power ratings, man. That's all it is. And I think people haven't adjusted enough, the power ratings. I mean, Venables looks like he's trying everything right now. It's like, if you're not going to show up, there's the door, or whatever he's saying, all this kind of coach speak. And I'm like, I don't know, man. Can he just keep his mouth shut, get in there in the locker room and try to fire up guys in the right way rather than this hype that we see going on right now? I mean, maybe he's a little panicked trying to keep his job. But the bottom line is I'm not going to get involved in this game, but I think if you were, the value lies a little bit with the Jayhawks in this contest. Again, the one bad point, or the one negative against Kansas in this one, not just that there's more talent on the other side of the football. We do know that. You got the better coach for Kansas. But the bottom line is that, again, when you get a team 5-6 weeks into this season, and this has been going on for many, many years when it comes to sports betting, if they're not a major elite power who's used to being 6-0 every year, halfway through the season, all of a sudden they come out of nowhere like Kansas has. They have an over-under wins total of like 2.5, and they're 5-0 or whatever they were. They lose that first game, it's like there's a drop-off in energy level. And you can go back many years and see how this has worked against the spread from a betting standpoint. So that's the only thing that keeps me off back in Kansas plus those points this week.
All right, the final game we got this week, of course, Nebraska is going to be at Purdue. I actually saw this on Twitter earlier because it's back up to 13.5, dropped to 11 earlier in the week. And somebody on Twitter was like, oh, my God, how can they disrespect Nebraska by putting them 11-point underdog? And I'm like, oh, my God, the arrogance is good. They beat Rutgers and they beat Indiana, and the arrogance is returned. Two games, bad teams, and all it took was, I can't believe we're an 11-point underdog. Scott, explain why Nebraska is a 13.5-point underdog.
It's a good number at 13.5, 14. It's where it should be. Neutral site power ratings have, Purdue around a 9.5 to 10.5 point favorite, depending on whose power ratings you use. So throw in West Lafayette into the mix and you're talking another 4 points, so it's where the number should be. We've seen back and forth on this game. Listen, Nebraska may come out, make this a game, make it close, pull a miracle upset. But the bottom line is how can you continue to bet on Nebraska week in, week out? And you see people coming in, here in Las Vegas, walking into these books, plunking down their money on the Huskers. Listen, I get the excitement, 2 wins in a row, but it came against 2 of the bottom 3 teams in the Big Ten, the other being Northwestern. And, oh, by the way, they beat Nebraska, did Northwestern. So, last week I'm watching that game, and I mean, it was tough to stomach. I mean, my gosh, you're going up against Rutgers, and the one thing you've been able to do is score some points this year, and now you can't score points for a half against Rutgers. The good news for Nebraska is, it used to be under Scott Frost, maybe not this year, but the past seasons. I always thought Scott Frost had his team ready to go on the opening kickoff and with a decent game plan, and then make no adjustments, compared to the other sideline. Well, with Mickey, it seems like sluggish starts, but they're making great adjustments, the assistant coaches and the players. But they were so flat last week. How could you be flat off a beat in Indiana, to start that game? And again, I give them credit. They came back. But all of a sudden, we're going to, crown Mickey Joseph with the permanent head coaching spot. God love him. I got nothing against Mickey. I wish he'd win every game he coaches the rest of the way. But because you got done beating up 2 of the worst offenses in the Big Ten, now all of a sudden Nebraska's back in the mix. Listen, if you look at what they've done, give the defense credit. 14 points allowed the last 6 quarters, about 4.5, a little over 4.5 yards per play. That's good stuff. Purdue's defense is their weakness. You always have to sweat a potential backdoor cover when you're laying double digits with a team that doesn't have a great defense. They're so on the stop unit. I'd love to see Nebraska hang this one and stay close. I made the final score before the line came out, 38-24, before the line came out. And I feel like I might be a little bit too high on that. This might be more of like a 35-17 type of game. I'm just trying to imagine Nebraska getting to 24 without a lot of help. And they might have to do that this week. They might not get the turnovers.
So you're saying probably defense needs to score or special team score if they're going to get to 24.
I mean, I don't know if they will, though, because that's the thing is like last week they got some bad passes by Indiana quarterback or by Rutgers quarterbacks that kept them in the mix. That's not a team you can count on Purdue going out and making mistakes and shooting themselves in the foot left and right. So I'm thinking they got to have a really good – they better be run blocking well. They better be protecting Casey Thompson because you don't want this game to get away from you. And listen, man, I'm a Husker fan at heart. You guys know it, everybody watching. But, man, I think the number's right where it should be, 14.
There you go. What are you laughing at?
I'm laughing here because you're talking about well, they better be blocking well and protecting Casey Thompson. I'm like, well, yeah, that's not happening.
For the first time this season. Yeah.
Yeah, they're going to suddenly bring it all together this week.
I like to use the term, they're not going to quite yet find the sweet elixir. And that's what I feel is going to happen here.
It could be worse. You could have Iowa's offense, right? I mean, being an Iowa fan, I got to suffer through the worst offense in the country, and what is on track to be the worst offense in Big Ten history.
I told
Big
you, Travis.
Ten history.
Oh, I know. I told you a few weeks ago. I tweeted out. Shenander was still coaching the Huskers at the time, and they just lost to Georgia Southern. And I'm down at the circuit. I'm doing the VSiN show, and I was really bummed when eventually Shenander got fired because I did tweet out that I was really looking forward to the epic battle between Nebraska's defense and Iowa's offense. I couldn't wait to see that incredible outing. But as far as this game is concerned, listen, I got to lean. If somebody says, I just absolutely have to bet this game, I got to lay the points. Maybe I'll be wrong, but everything you've seen on paper, you mentioned the Syracuse game. Purdue probably should have won that game. They lost by 3, 32-29 against a very good Syracuse team. They probably should have won that game.
Should have beat Penn State probably
climb.
Too.
You're right. They had a chance. They lost by 4, was it? Yep. 35-31. So
and that was that first game of the year, that first weekend of the year when they were already in conference play.
Hey, if Nebraska can hang this number, if they pull the upset, just give Mickey the job right now. If they hang the number, that he's in the mix.
Of course, if you haven't watched the Doc's Diagnosis, we encourage you to go to our YouTube channel, subscribe, and it's presented by Centris Federal Credit Union. Dr. Rob takes about 3 plays during the week, and he draws up his diagnosis. We use a little telestrator. He's an artiste. He's like a Van Gogh. He's a Rembrandt. He's a Picasso with the telestrator. Dr. Rob is. It's presented by Centris Federal Credit Union. We won't have any Doc's Diagnosis next week because, well, Doc's going to be at the Clemson Florida State game, and so he won't be back in time to do that. But just keep in mind, you want to go back and watch some of those old ones, you can. If you want to hear more from Scott Spreitzer each and every day, text the word Doc Talk to the number 29022, and you're going to get a text. It's going to include a link where you can have access to all Scott's important pages, such as his free daily pick videos, as well as a page where you can sign up and get $60 in Scott's premium member-only picks. Again, the word Doc Talk to the number 29022 for more free picks from Scott 7 days a week. If you want a free bet from Betfred Sports, first of all, you got to download the Betfred Sports app on the Apple and Google Play stores. Pretty cool. Betfred Sports has a billboard out there on I-80 right around 42nd Street. Dr. Rob, I was driving him downtown today, and like buses had Betfred Sports all over it. There's like a billboard for Betfred Sports, which is pretty cool.
A growing amount of this.
So I texted Brian Bennett. I said, hey, just to let you know, I think Doc Talk Sports has had a big play in this. Let us know what your numbers are from the 402 and the 712. But you can get a free $20 bet. Download the Betfred Sports app, create a new account, use the promo code Doc Talk, and you'll get a $20 bet in Arizona, Colorado, and Iowa. Tonight's show is for entertainment purposes only. And, of course, if you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. And follow Doc Talk Sports on the social media channel. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Like Doc Talk Sports on Facebook. Follow Dr. Rob on Twitter at Doc Talk Sports. And you can follow me on Twitter at Travis Creates. And, of course, Scott Spreitzer is on Twitter as well at Scott Wins. Scott, so those are the games tonight. We're going to be Thursday next week, right? We're doing Thursday again next week?
Sounds good.
All right. Piece of cake.
I'm good.
Wrong song there. Gave the wrong song,
Don't
Rob.
do the wrong song, Trevor.
Yeah. Don't want to do that. Don't want to do the wrong song. For Dr. Rob Zatechka, I'm Travis Justice, and he's Scott Spreitzer. We will talk to you next week on another edition of Behind the Point Spread, presented by Betfred Sports.